Sovereign of the Sand, the engineering of island survival. Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we are taking on the ultimate survival thought experiment. You know that fantasy of owning a private island? Yeah, we're going to look at the gritty, heavily engineered reality behind that dream today. We'll be breaking down the mechanics, the intense logistics, and the sheer human endurance it takes to literally conquer total geographical isolation. It's a wild ride, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it. You just inherited a private tropical island. Instantly, your brain goes to a cinematic sunrise, right? Hammock swinging, coconuts, total zen. Well, actually, scratch that. Let's strip that fantasy right down to the studs. The real story begins the exact seconds you step off your final supply boat and watch its hull disappear over the horizon. There's no room service out here, no late-night food delivery apps to fall back on. The silence that hits you on that beach isn't a spa retreat. It's the terrifying, profound realization that you are suddenly entirely alone on a thin little ribbon of sand.
To really grasp why that silence feels so heavy, we have to contrast it with the invisible ease of our everyday city lives. Think about it. In a city, your survival is completely outsourced. You flip a switch, lights come on. Turn a tap, water flows. Dial 3 digits, and an ambulance is there. It's a massive, invisible safety net. But out there in the island reality, that entire protective web is instantly severed. You're sandwiched right between an untamed jungle and an indifferent ocean. The carefree paradise vibe evaporates real quick. Because you, my friend, are now the sole engineer, the logistics coordinator, and the utility operator of your own sovereign micronation.
And your very first mandate as this new sovereign? Absolutely dictating the water cycle. It is, without a doubt, the most immediate, unforgiving crisis you're going to face. You're surrounded by this gorgeous, shimmering, infinite ocean. But here's the crazy environmental paradox. All that salt water is literally a lethal poison to human biology. So you have to completely bypass the beach and plunge into the humid, dense interior, just searching for a freshwater lens. That's the super fragile layer of groundwater floating precariously right above the denser saltwater table underground. Now, what's really interesting about this is, what happens if your island is just volcanic rock or porous coral? If you don't have a natural aquifer, your entire existence becomes tethered to an industrial reverse osmosis desalination plant. It's a high-stakes engineering marvel, honestly. High-pressure pumps force raw seawater through these micro-thin polymer membranes to separate out the pure water molecules from the salt crust. Think about that for a second. Your daily survival, just getting a basic glass of tap water, hinges entirely on synthetic filters and chemical balancing agents holding up. One mechanical failure, and your island paradise becomes a sun-baked desert in literally a matter of days. But here's the kicker. That mechanical lifeline, it's completely dead in the water without power. You absolutely need a self-sustaining energy grid. Now you're probably thinking, okay, massive array of high-efficiency solar panels and sophisticated lithium iron phosphate batteries, right? Clean, silent power. Well, running a solar grid in a maritime environment is just a relentless daily battle. You are constantly fighting intense ultraviolet degradation. The salt air acts as this highly effective conductor of corrosion that just eats away at exposed wiring and oxidizes electrical contacts. Plus, you've got ambient humidity constantly trying to breach your weatherproof seals. It is tough.
And because of all those environmental threats, if you get hit with consecutive days of tropical storms, solar simply isn't going to cut it. You have to have heavy-duty, marine-grade diesel or biofuel generators as a backup. And that introduces a staggering new headache: fuel. We're talking thousands of gallons. That is a massive amount of specialized marine-grade fuel you have to keep on hand. It doesn't just magically spawn on site either. It requires back-breaking manual labor, hauling heavy barrels across open water, dragging them up the beach by hand, and locking them up in blast-resistant double-walled containment units. Because one terminal spill and your fragile ecosystem is completely toast.
Which brings us to a really massive realization, and it's perfectly captured in this quote right from our source material. The sheer friction of the maritime supply chain quickly emerges as the ultimate boundary. It is so true. The horizon isn't just a pretty view anymore. It acts as an unyielding wall separating you from all global manufacturing. Back in the city, a broken pipe is a 10-minute run to the hardware store. Out here, the horizon dictates exactly what is and isn't possible. Let's break down what that friction actually looks like in practice. Let's say you need a specific metric fuel filter. Or maybe you need sacks of structural concrete, or just some spare mechanical seals. Every single one of those items has to be meticulously budgeted, ordered weeks in advance, manually created, and then navigated through totally unpredictable open sea currents and treacherous coral reef channels. It's a logistical nightmare. If you forget just one tiny replacement seal for your primary water pump, you could be left completely stranded. That one little oversight can stall your entire island development for a whole month while you wait for the next safe charter window.
Because you're dealing with this extreme friction, your brain goes through something called logistical reprogramming. This absolute spatial isolation completely rewires how you think. You stop seeing standard trash. Suddenly every plastic bucket, every scrap of basic cut lumber, every discarded piece of copper wire is instantly transformed into a precious, heavily guarded asset. You will find yourself maintaining, repurposing, and recycling these everyday items until they absolutely, categorically fall apart in your hands.
So the crucial point is, biological survival isn't the end of the story. Once you finally have your water and your power sorted out, you're faced with the staggering operational costs of maintaining all this crazy infrastructure. Leaving an island completely idle, that is a fast track to absolute financial ruin. You have to aggressively pivot your mindset from pure survival over to wealth generation. Basically, you have to start treating your piece of landmass as a high-yield production asset.
So how exactly do you pull that off? Well, you monetize the sandbox. For example, you can tap into the global fascination with off-grid living and turn your constant engineering breakdowns into a massive digital media project. Because let's be real, nothing funds a brand new heavy excavator quite like millions of people watching you struggle to survive on YouTube, right? Or you could leverage your microclimate to develop a boutique, ultra-exclusive luxury eco-hub. You could even cultivate high-value tropical resources for global export. But this commercialization, it's absolutely mandatory if you want to pay for the construction crews and the high-end machinery your island is going to constantly demand.
And trust me, you are going to need those excavators and construction crews because you are building against a relentless chemical onslaught. The tropical climate itself is actively trying to tear down everything you assemble. That same air that makes the island look like a postcard, it's saturated with, quote, a destructive mist of vaporized salt crystals driven inland by the constant, unyielding sea breeze. It's brutal. This ambient salinity will rapidly eat right through standard construction steel in literally a single season, and it short-circuits basic residential electronics with alarming frequency. And this brilliantly illustrates why cheap, conventional building methods just have to be thrown completely out the window. You have to pivot to serious marine-grade upgrades. You aren't just building a house out there, you are engineering a structural skeleton designed to absorb terrifying kinetic impacts from hurricane-force winds. We're talking foundations made of thick, poured concrete. The electrical grid needs copper-clad wiring protected in heavy conduits. You're forced to use really expensive, naturally resinous hardwoods, like teak or ipe, just because they naturally resist moisture rot and those voracious local wood-boring insects. And every single roof has to be heavily anchored just to shed the torrential monsoon rains.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the most profound change of all, the permanent psychological shift within yourself. That whole leisure narrative you started with, it's utterly stripped away. Your internal identity is completely reshaped. Eventually, you learn to just fall asleep to the rhythmic thump of a diesel generator. You develop calloused hands, sun-baked skin, and a brain that is constantly, involuntarily running real-time risk assessment algorithms. You're always analyzing weather patterns, fuel reserves, and structural wear. You just can't turn it off. Which brings us to the ultimate realization of this explainer. The source material states it perfectly. True geographical freedom is not an escape from labor, but a radical intensification of personal responsibility. Absolute autonomy has a really daunting face. It's the freedom to succeed, sure, but also the freedom to fail entirely on your own terms. There's no municipal backup coming to save you when the sea rises. Every comfort around you, every light that shines, every single drop of fresh water you drink exists solely because of your own two hands. But from that immense, heavy burden comes a really deep, unshakable peace that completely replaces all the old anxieties of the civilized world. You get to look out across your own unbroken horizon, knowing you fully engineered your own existence. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder today. If that supply boat dropped you off on the beach tomorrow, do you truly possess the vision, the discipline, and the raw grit to build a civilization from scratch on an empty shore? Think about that for a bit, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.